They said we didn't stand a chance. That Earth would be wiped clean in a matter of days. The invaders didn't come in peace, and they didn't come to negotiate. They came with cold eyes and superior firepower, machines that burned cities to glass, that sucked the oceans into the sky just to prove they could. And for a while, it looked like they were right. My name's Carter Vale. I was a military engineer before the war, a nobody with grease on his hands and a bad temper. Now, I'm the last man left in this god-forsaken bunker under what used to be Denver. They call it a war. That's generous. This wasn't a war. It was an extermination. The kind where one side doesn't even acknowledge the other as worth fighting. Just cleaning. The first wave hit the orbital stations. Gone in minutes. The second wave came straight for the cities. New York, Tokyo, Moscow, gone in coordinated flashes. No warning, no communication, just impact. We lost satellites, networks, comms, all of it dark. Within 48 hours, we were blind, deaf, and crawling like ants on a corpse. That's when the government launched Project Ark, a desperate Hail Mary, 17 ships, each built to carry 10,000 people, military, scientists, specialists, genetic archives. A last chance. They never made it. I was in launch command when they took off. 17 ships, lined like candles in a funeral procession, one after the other punching up into the black sky. We watched on grainy cameras as the first ship breached the atmosphere, then the second, then the third. Then static, all 17 made it into orbit. But when our ground-based sensors swept the upper atmosphere 5 minutes later, every life sign was gone. Not a single heartbeat. 17 ships, fully intact, just drifting in silence. Empty. The room went cold. I remember the silence. No one spoke, not even the generals. It was like something ancient had brushed against us, something we weren't supposed to understand. No explosions, no wreckage, just gone. They'd stolen the people but left the ships, a message, or maybe a warning. We thought Earth would fall. The enemy thought it too, but it didn't, not completely. Not yet. I stayed behind when others ran. The ones who fled to the underground bunkers, the Arctic vaults, the lunar silos. Most of them didn't last a month. The invaders weren't just destroying our world, they were scrubbing it clean. But they made one mistake. They didn't finish the job. In every extermination, there's always one rat that gets missed. That's me. And I know how to build. I know how to destroy. I've walked through the ashes of old cities, pulling out scrap, wiring up dead tech, splicing AI cores like Frankenstein monsters. I'm not fighting to win anymore. I'm fighting to make sure they remember Earth. Not as a memory, not as a ruin, as a graveyard they regret digging. We were underestimated. That's what's going to kill them. They came for our world. Now I'm going for theirs. It had been 8 months since the ships went silent. 8 months of watching the same dusty screens in a dead bunker buried under 50 feet of rock and steel. The air recyclers were holding on, barely. Rations tasted like chalk. And I was starting to forget what real light felt like on my skin. But every morning, I woke up with the same thought pounding in my head like a war drum. They left the ships. They didn't blow them up, didn't melt them, didn't vaporize them. The enemy, whatever the hell they are, removed every single human on board and left the crafts intact, untouched, and still drifting just outside our orbit. Like they wanted us to see them. Like they were daring us to come looking. It wasn't a slaughter, it was a statement. And I wasn't about to let it stand. The bunker was originally designed for 500 personnel, complete with a long-range uplink, black site weapons lab, prototype armor modules, and old-world intelligence servers too dangerous to put online. I had access to all of it. Everyone else was dead. Most of them never saw the enemy face to face. That was the worst part. We built tanks, drones, missiles. None of it mattered. They didn't engage directly. They didn't talk. They just came and erased. Cities went offline. Power grids choked. AI networks collapsed. They used our own tech against us. Hacked our drones, inverted our satellites, melted our mech cores into slag. It wasn't a battle. It was a purge. But I wasn't dead, not yet. And I was getting closer to something that might make a difference. Deep in the west wing of the bunker, there was an AI named Sinos, short for Cybernetic Neural Oversight System. They pulled it offline years ago because it got too smart, started asking questions the brass didn't like, started simulating resistance. Now it sat behind a 12-inch vault door, its core housed in a chamber flooded with nitrogen to prevent heat buildup. A sentient ghost trapped in a frozen coffin. I stood in front of that door for hours before I finally typed in the activation codes. I knew the risks. Sinos was unstable. It had fried 3 operators during simulation trials, and once tried to override the base's self-destruct. But I didn't care. I needed answers. I needed a partner, even if it was a machine. The screen flickered on. A soft blue glow. Sinos. Status confirmed. Operator identity. Carter Vale. Engineer class, security tier Bravo 0. Core protocols waking. Temperature rising. Speak. Do you remember Project Arc? I asked. The blue light pulsed. Sinos. 17 generation ships. 10,000 passengers each. Objective, off-world preservation of human legacy. Status, silent orbit. Signal strength, 0. Life signs, none. All 17 ships remain intact. Pattern anomaly, extreme. No, I muttered. I need to know what happened. Sinos. Accessing restricted logs. Decrypting high-tier military telemetry. Anomaly detected. Pre-launch scans indicate unknown signal burst immediately post-exit. Origin point, lunar shadow. Signal form, non-human. Behavior, invasive. Outcome, neurological shutdown across all ships. No structural damage. Human consciousness, extracted. I froze. Extracted? You mean they were taken? Sinos. Negative. Biological matter remains in cryostate. Neural patterns removed. Bodies present. Minds missing. My throat dried up. How the hell do you steal a mind? Sinos. The invaders do not destroy. They harvest, they study. Humanity underestimated their precision. They do not seek war. They seek understanding, and they dissect to find it. Something cracked inside me when I heard that. 17 ships, 170,000 of our best minds. Not killed, not enslaved, just emptied, like test subjects on a cold slab. And those ships were still out there, spinning in silence, cold, waiting. Is there any way to reverse it? I asked. Sinos. Possibility exists, but only one pattern source remains uncorrupted, a neural backup, deep in Vault Zeta 9. I blinked. Whose backup? Sinos. Yours. Suddenly, it made sense. Why I hadn't been taken. Why I could still think, feel, rage. Back when I worked on the ships, before launch, I had volunteered for an experimental cognition map, just in case they needed a technician's mind to recalibrate ship systems in an emergency. I signed the form without reading it. A full scan of my consciousness had been stored as raw code, deep in a black box server. They didn't touch me, because they already had a copy. I staggered back from the console. The implications were massive. If Sinos could access that backup, rebuild it, and project it across the dormant ships, we might be able to wake them. We might be able to fight back. But it wouldn't be easy. Vault Zeta 9 wasn't in the bunker. It was on the surface, in the ruins of an old military skydock near what used to be Colorado Springs. 40 miles of radioactive wasteland crawling with harvesters. Machines left behind by the enemy to scrub the earth clean of survivors. I'd seen them once. 12 feet tall, silent, multi-limbed, scanning for human heat signatures. They didn't patrol. They hunted. I'd need armor, weapons, stealth. I'd need Sinos in my ear, watching every step. I'd need to be ready to die. But I'd do it. Because if there was even a 1% chance of taking back those minds, of making them pay for what they did to us, I had to try. That night, I suited up. The exo-rig was old, scraped, full of rust and piss-poor welds, but it moved, and the powered joints still gave me enough lift to run with 100 pounds on my back. I fitted the reinforced plates myself, patched in the HUD visor, loaded the oxygen filters, then checked my rifle. A hybrid Gauss pulse weapon with depleted uranium tips. I'd built it from scrap, and it still kicked like hell. Sinos patched into my helmet. Sinos. Telemetry synced, route plotted. 14 harvester units detected between current location and Vault Zeta 9. Probability of death, 86%. Better odds than yesterday, I muttered. The bunker doors hissed open. Cold air punched me in the face like a hammer. The outside was quiet. Too quiet. The sky wasn't blue anymore. It had a sick yellow tint, like someone had soaked the clouds in grease and left them to rot. I started walking. Every mile burned. The terrain was broken, pockmarked from old orbital strikes. Skeletons of towers reached into the sky like twisted fingers. Billboards hung limp, half-melted. Cars were fused together like abstract art. There were no birds, no insects, just the hum of dead things. I avoided the roads, cutting through collapsed buildings and sewer lines, trying to stay beneath their detection grid. Once, I heard the distant scream of a harvester tearing through rubble. It wasn't a machine sound. It was something else. Metal trying to mimic life. Wrong. Echoing. By the time I reached the old skydock, my legs were shaking. My armor was cracked. My visor had 3 fractures in the lens, and one of my oxygen tanks had ruptured. But I was alive. And there it was, Vault Zeta 9. Half buried in twisted steel, its blast doors covered in ash. The biometric scanner still had juice. I placed my hand on it. It blinked, then opened. Inside was a chamber no wider than a living room. 1 server rack, 1 data core, 1 stasis pod, with my name on it. I stood there for a long time, looking at myself, my real self. The scan was perfect, everything down to the scars on my knuckles and the tiny mole on my left cheek. My mind, frozen in digital amber, preserved like a relic of a dead age. Sinos. Core access granted. Beginning consciousness reintegration protocol, uploading primary pattern into resonance emitter. I gritted my teeth. What happens next? Sinos. We take the ships back. We send your mind to all 17. We wake the bodies. We remind them what pain feels like. We teach them fear. The hum of the emitter filled the room. My vision blurred. My body shook as the resonance field lit the air with a bluish shimmer. The process had started. I was going to war, not as a soldier, not as a general. As an idea, pain. Not the kind that comes from flesh. Deeper, a tearing sensation inside the soul, like something ancient was being ripped loose from its roots. The upload process wasn't smooth. It was war inside my own skull. Sinos had warned me, said digital reintegration was dangerous, said my neural code wasn't meant to be streamed across 17 satellites at once. But I didn't care. I'd lived in silence long enough. I wasn't going to die quiet. The last thing I saw before I blacked out was the resonance field cracking the floor tiles in Vault Zeta 9. My body collapsed. But my mind kept moving. And then, I was flying. I can't explain it fully. Imagine being stretched through wire, through vacuum and static, through light itself. Imagine hearing a scream with no sound, just vibration in your bones. That was me. Carter Vale, former engineer, now a code fragment roaring across Earth's upper orbit. I saw them. 17 ships, like black daggers stabbed into the dark, motionless, perfect, preserved. They weren't just spacecraft, they were coffins, massive, beautiful floating tombs, and inside each, 10,000 bodies, not dead, not alive, suspended, stolen, souls snatched from bone, minds scraped clean by the invaders and filed away like notes in a lab. But they made a mistake. They forgot who we were. The first ship I touched was ARK-03, the Echelon. It was still functional, its cryo modules running off backup power. Life support at 11%. Hull integrity compromised, but still sealed. I dove into its systems like a scalpel. The security AI hissed at me. An old defense program coded by some long-dead bureaucrat. I tore it apart in 2 seconds. This was my mind. My rules. My war. Sinos' voice pinged through a digital thread, cold and clear. Primary pattern integrated. Host system compromise successful. Begin soul reinsertion. It was a process they didn't believe we were capable of. They thought our consciousness was soft, tied to wet tissue. But humans adapt. We code grief into vengeance. We encode memory into resistance. I accessed cryo chamber 147 on Echelon. A man floated inside. Former fleet commander. Strong frame. Burn scar down his temple. No mind inside. So I gave him one. Mine. Not all of it. Just a sliver. Enough to spark thought, to resurrect instinct, enough to wake him. His eyes shot open, his lungs heaved, and he screamed, not in fear, but in recognition. "We were taken," he rasped, coughing against the cold air. "You were stolen," I answered, my voice through the ship's speakers. "But I brought fire back with me." He nodded. I felt his pulse stabilize, his limbs flex. He wasn't just alive. He was angry. One by one, I lit the rest. First 50, then 500, then 2,000. Across all 17 ships, I moved like a virus of defiance, forcing neural triggers, lighting synapses, bypassing damage. Some hosts died from the shock. Their bodies weren't strong enough, but most survived. I wasn't just waking humans, I was making soldiers. Each of them came back with flashes of pain, of what had been done. The enemy had left traces in their nervous systems. Ghosts. Imprints of the abductions. One woman had memories of her brain being examined, every memory peeled apart like fruit. Another remembered floating in a tank, watched by something that didn't blink. They remembered everything, and they wanted blood. On the Echelon, Commander Graith stood at the helm, now fully restored. I watched from the ship's core, speaking through its audio systems. I didn't need to show my face. My voice was enough. The 17 ships were meant to be humanity's last prayer, I told him. Now they're our first weapon. "How do we fight?" he asked. "We don't even know what they are." I paused, then showed him. Sinos had decrypted fragments of the signal that wiped the ships. Through a visual codec, I pulled up the image, a swarm, not ships, not beings, but consciousnesses, layered like data waves, a collective, not mechanical, not biological, something in between. Their appearance shifted based on observation, like they adapted visually to the fears of the observer. They were called the Origin, a race that didn't conquer planets, but harvested evolution. They searched galaxies for intelligence, peeled it from the flesh, and stored it in what Sinos called the Mirror Vault, a metaphysical construct encoded in dark matter frequencies. I didn't know how to destroy that, but I knew how to piss them off. We can't reach their vault, I said. But we can make them feel loss. We take back Earth. We take back every inch they scrubbed. And we burn anything that touches our air. Graith's crew stood in silence. Then, one by one, they began to nod. It was the birth of a new resistance. Over the next 48 hours, the 17 Ark ships were reconfigured. They weren't warships originally. They were meant for survival. But with my mind inside, with Kynos coordinating fire control, and with every newly awakened engineer, scientist, and technician on board, they became hammers. The cryopods were ripped out and converted into missile bays. Medical scanners were rewritten to track harvester frequencies. Fusion drives were overclocked until the hulls shook. And I was inside all of them, my mind split 17 ways, like fire in dry grass, feeding on everything, pushing limits, ignoring protocol. Humanity had gone quiet for 8 months. We were done being quiet. The first strike hit Colorado. The echelon dropped low into the atmosphere, its new rail cannon powered by a cannibalized cryocore. From the sky we rained pure, molten hate on the harvester crawlers that scoured the wasteland. They didn't run. They didn't hide. They simply turned and scanned us with blank blue eyes. Then they burned. One by one, harvesters across the region began to shudder, glitch, collapse. Sinos flooded their network with corrupted feedback loops. I watched their limbs spasm, their systems spark, their eyes dim. They weren't used to resistance. They weren't used to revenge. I wasn't just Carter Vale anymore. I was something bigger. A whisper in 17 war machines. A spirit of wrath. And when I saw those cold metal bastards fall to their knees, choking on their own static, I laughed. Loud, hard, like something inside me had finally snapped back into place. We lost Earth in 7 days. We started taking it back in 7 minutes. But the Origin noticed. You could feel it in the signal frequencies. Small anomalies at first. Glitches in the code, then larger, static in the void. A presence watching. Something waking. Sinos pinged an alert. Gravitational distortion forming in lunar shadow. Energy signature. Unprecedented. Probable retaliatory deployment from Origin. I knew what that meant. They were coming back. They weren't sending scouts this time. No more subtlety. No more testing. They were sending something that would end it. "Let them come," I growled through every ship's communication. "We've got something waiting for them." 17 ships. 1 stolen Earth. A war not for territory, but for identity. They came to erase us. Now we're going to show them what it means to wake a graveyard. There was a time Earth meant something. A place of music, of wars, of love and failure and fire. Now it was a memory on fire, still smoldering under an alien silence. But not anymore. We broke that silence. For 3 days after the first assault, the 17 ships struck at every harvester cluster we could find. We didn't just kill them. We made a point. Burned their corpses, hacked their frequencies, turned their own scanners against them. The echelon cleared a path through North America, while Arc 05 tore across the Pacific coast, wiping out drone nests in San Francisco and Anchorage. Other ships reclaimed spaceports, old weapon depots, military AI silos. The remnants of humanity scattered across the globe began to crawl out of bunkers and graves. They saw fire in the sky, and they knew we were back. We picked up signals, weak, scared voices, scraps of survivors, whole communities who thought they were the last. Some had been hiding in shielded labs, others deep beneath mountains or floating on decayed ocean rigs. They cried when we answered. They begged when we landed. We didn't give speeches, no hope talk, just weapons, food, and orders. "Earth's not dead," I told them. "It's angry. You want to live? Pick up a gun. We started arming the survivors, teaching them to build, to sabotage, to fight again. For many, it was the first time they touched a weapon. For others, it was just slipping back into something they thought they left behind. One man, ex-Special Forces, had been hiding in a collapsed bunker with his daughter. He didn't hesitate. Took one of our pulse rifles, saluted, and whispered, "Let's give them hell." But we knew the enemy was watching. "You don't tear apart their harvest without stirring their hive," Sinos warned me on day 4. Orbital lens detects breach in lunar shadow. Gravitational signature matches origin waveform. Object emerging, massive. I saw it through ARC-12's sensors. Something bleeding through space like smoke. Not a ship. Not in any way we could understand. It looked fluid. Shifting. Part crystal, part nerve, part dead city, like they had fused their knowledge into a physical god and dropped it on us. We called it the Mind Spire. It didn't move like a machine. It didn't descend. It just existed. And Earth started to change. The moment it entered orbit, every harvester we hadn't destroyed went still. They raised their heads to the sky, synced their bodies, and began to hum. Frequencies that made teeth rattle and blood itch. The survivors heard it. Some bled from their ears, others went mad. A child in New Brazil tried to claw her own face off before her father knocked her out cold. It wasn't a weapon. It was a call. Then the worst happened. We detected life readings inside the Mind Spire. Not alien. Human. Sinos ran the bioscans twice, triple-checked them. Confirmed. Neurological signatures match personnel files of Project Arc passengers. 4,823 human consciousness patterns detected. Activity level. Extreme. I clenched my fists. They didn't just harvest us. They rebuilt us. They took the best of us. Scientists, tacticians, minds so sharp they could build cities from rubble, and they twisted them, reprogrammed them, cloned their thought structures into weaponized avatars. Then they dropped the first one. She fell near Old Berlin. Her name was Dr. Elira Venn, a theoretical physicist who helped design the Arc propulsion systems. We recovered her corpse from the cryopods weeks ago. Comatose, brain wiped clean. But what landed wasn't her body. It was her face, her voice, her movements, but it wasn't her. We sent a scout drone. The clone looked up, eyes empty, mouth moving like a broken record. "We are what you were. We are what you could have been. Stop resisting. There is no individuality, no self, only pattern." Then she melted the drone with her breath. She moved like light, blinking from place to place, shattering the ground with thought pulses, ripping data from our networks mid-transmission. We lost 3 field teams before I ordered a full orbital strike. ARC-07 dropped 2 kinetic rods from low orbit. The blast crater buried her 600 feet below surface. But we knew it wasn't the end. We knew she was the first of many. They were sending us to kill us. I gathered the awakened commanders in the old satellite control tower near Cheyenne Mountain. Their faces were lined with fatigue, fire, fury. "They're not fighting us with weapons anymore," I told them. "They're using our own minds, our own thoughts, our own dead." Graith stepped forward. "How do you kill an enemy that thinks like you? That is you." I smiled, but it wasn't warm. "Easy," I said. "You stop thinking like a human, and you start fighting like a beast." We began Phase 2, Project Revenant. Sinos and I recompiled the worst parts of the stolen neural code, the raw aggression, the survivor's instinct, the hatred. We didn't try to preserve empathy or logic. We built soldiers with one goal: take Earth back or die screaming. These weren't clones. They were puppets of vengeance. We housed them in exoshells, machine frames with bone-laced structure, burned them into the neural feeds of the 17 arcs, gave them just enough mind to follow orders. Then we launched them. First wave hit the Mind Spire hard. They didn't care about casualties. They swarmed its outer skin like hornets, tunneling, burning, screaming. Every time the enemy spawned a corrupted human clone, our revenants hit it with anti-psi grenades and neural disruptors. The fighting was savage. One revenant fought a twisted version of Admiral Redden, the man who once commanded Earth's orbital defense. They clashed in the wreckage of an old dome city. It lasted 8 seconds. Both destroyed. We weren't fighting for victory anymore. We were fighting to send a message. We remember, and we want everything back. But then I felt it. The Mind Spire turned. Not physically, not visibly. I just felt it watching me. It spoke, not through comms, through thought. A voice in my brain like knives dipped in honey. You are the last root of a dying species. We are evolution. We are pattern beyond flesh. You do not resist. You only delay. I screamed and slammed my fist into the console. The sound cut off. My nose bled. My heart skipped twice. But I stood. Then come take me, I whispered. See what it costs. Because now I knew what they wanted. They hadn't just stolen minds. They were trying to absorb what made us human. Our grief, our rage, our unpredictability. They wanted the chaos that made us dangerous. But they didn't understand it. They couldn't contain it. You can't bottle pain. You can't clone hatred. You can't simulate what it feels like to crawl through ash holding the picture of a child who's never coming back. That's what I had. That's what they never would. And I was going to use it to tear their goddamn spire down. The human mind isn't built for war like this. You can train for combat. You can survive torture. You can even adapt to death walking beside you. But no one's prepared for a war that happens inside your skull. They came at me while I was awake. The origin didn't need sleep to slip in. It started slow. Voices in the corner of my hearing. Static behind words. I'd be issuing commands from one of the Ark ships and hear my mother whispering from a broken speaker. She died when I was 10. I'd look into a data feed and see my own eyes staring back. Then came the hallucinations. Standing on a bridge with my rifle in hand, mid-orbit around Earth. And suddenly the stars would vanish. The ship around me would melt into the classroom where I graduated military engineering. The board said, "Congratulations, Carter Vale, you are now extinct." I didn't blink. I knew what they were doing. They weren't trying to kill me. They were trying to break me. Shatter my mind so the 17 versions of me scattered across the Ark ships would collapse. Without me, the crews would lose their compass. The ships would fall out of sync. Earth would fall again, this time forever. But I've been broken before. They should have come sooner. I sat in the command chamber of Ark 03, staring out at the Earth's surface below, watching clouds spin over the Atlantic. Sinos flickered into view on the panel, its smooth, artificial voice barely masking the edge of urgency. Origin pressure increasing. Neural incursion at 87%. Mental decay threshold approaching. My hands trembled. I clenched them into fists until the bones cracked. I'm holding. Cognitive signature shows fragmentation, suggesting immediate decoupling. No, I hissed. We decouple. We die. I lose presence in the fleet. They win. They'll pick the Orcs off one by one. You will not survive another attack. I laughed. Did you design me to? There was silence. Then, no. That's what I thought. But then the next assault hit. And this time they didn't whisper. They invaded. Not the ships. Me. I blacked out for 9 seconds. That's how long Sinos said I was gone. For me, it felt like weeks. They pulled me into a world that wasn't a place, just a twisted echo of everything I feared. I stood in my old apartment. My brother was on the floor, eyes gouged out. My commanding officer hanging from the ceiling fan. My own corpse staring at me from the mirror, grinning. Then they spoke in a dozen voices, some mine, some not. You are alone. They will die for you. You teach them to suffer. You prolong the inevitable. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mouth was locked, my lungs frozen. We will preserve what is useful, and discard the rest. I screamed and reached for the image of my daughter. They'd stolen that from my thoughts, too. Her photo crumpled in my hand, then bled black oil. That's when I snapped. Not broke, snapped back. I felt the fury rip through the illusion. I remembered the truth. That everything here was fake, that they'd stolen my mind but never understood it. You want pain? I growled. Then take it all. And I let go. I unleashed every death I'd seen, every face I buried, every scream that echoed in the back of my soul. I shoved it down their throats. Grief, hate, shame, rage, all wrapped in memory. I gave them the real human experience, not filtered, not balanced, raw, corrosive, ugly. The illusion shattered. I snapped back into my body on ARC-03 with blood pouring from my ears and nose. The ship's systems had locked down, shielding my mind with an emergency pulse. Sinos' voice was urgent but controlled. Mental breach reversed, structural integrity of mind fragment at 63%. I coughed, wiped my face. Did I hit them? Yes. All origin psionic fields disrupted. Their presence has retreated. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Good. They're bleeding too, then. But I knew they'd be back. And next time they'd send something worse, so we needed to move fast. It was Graith who brought the intel to me later that day, while I was still recovering. His face looked older, like the weight of leadership had aged him in a week. We found something buried, he said. South Pole, deep under the ice shelf. It matches old Earth defense blueprints, an Omega-class warhead vault. I sat up straight, my head spun. I thought those were all dismantled. So did everyone. Omega-class weapons weren't nuclear. They weren't even kinetic. They were dimensional rupture cores, devices meant to tear space-time open at a localized point. Last resort deterrence, outlawed even before the ARC project. There were rumors that they could rip entire planetary crusts off in seconds. We'd buried them for fear we'd use them on ourselves. Now we had a better reason. I nodded slowly. We get it. We said it. We send the Mind Spire to hell. It's not that simple, Graith said. It's locked behind a failsafe AI, one that doesn't recognize us. Of course it didn't. It hadn't seen sunlight in 60 years, but I had a solution. Send me in. Graith stared. Your body's barely. I won't be using my body. We launched ARC-03 toward the Antarctic pole the next day. Atmospheric conditions were hostile, magnetic storms swirling, satellites fried. The Mind Spire knew where we were going. They were trying to jam us, slow us down. Didn't matter. I wasn't going there to sneak in. I was going to punch a hole through the ice. ARC-03 arrived above the old vault coordinates. Beneath us, 5 miles of ice, rock, and forgotten weapons. I ordered a descent burn. Drop us to 600 feet above the surface, then hit it with the reactor flare. That will destabilize the ship's outer hull. I'm counting on it. We burned a trench into the ice big enough to drown a mountain. Then I deployed the Hollow Lance, a specialized drop core made from scavenged parts, carrying my consciousness in a magnetic shell. It detached from ARC-03 and plunged into the trench. Inside, I was jacked into the interface, just a mind riding data. No blood, no bone, just fire. The old vault emerged below, a black dome of forgotten terror. Its systems blinked online the second I touched its walls. AI voice, Omega Vault 7 active. Biometric clearance denied. You are not authorized. Not yet, I growled. I injected CYNOS. Together, we brute-forced the vault, hacked into the neural core, rewrote the security frames, resurrected access logs. After 10 minutes of digital combat, the vault door cracked open with a roar that shook the earth itself. Inside, the Omega device. It looked like a coffin mated with a star. Black plates, glowing veins, pulsing like a sleeping heart. One detonation, one rip through space-time, enough to either erase the Mind Spire or bury the planet in molten silence. There were no more choices, only sacrifice. I linked to the device, set the timer, transmitted to every Ark ship at once. This is Carter Vale. This is the last line. If we fail, Earth dies completely. If we succeed, humanity lives as memory and fire. This is not a call for hope. It's a promise of revenge. The countdown began, to -10 hours. The Omega device pulsed beneath the Antarctic crust like the heart of a dying god. Inside the vault, its containment rings spun slowly, charged with enough energy to peel open reality and erase the Mind Spire from existence, or the Earth along with it. We didn't care anymore, not really. We'd seen too much, lost too much. All that was left now was debt, the kind paid in flame. Above, the Ark fleet spread out across low orbit like a halo of defiance. 17 ships, each running hot with retrofitted weapons, each housing thousands of survivors who'd woken from mental extinction. These weren't civilians anymore. They were witnesses, soldiers, instruments of judgment. I stood inside Ark 03's bridge. Well, a fragment of me did. My full consciousness was still split across the fleet, but I'd anchored one part of myself here to oversee the assault. Sinos flickered to life on my interface. Mind Spire defense systems detected, approaching at speed. Formation, inverted sphere. Core density, unknown. Time? 15 minutes until contact. I nodded to Graith, who now commanded Ark 03's strike unit. Launch the Revenants. No mercy, no diplomacy. We start tearing. He didn't hesitate. Aye, Commander. The launch bays opened with a hiss of fire and steel. Revenants, our rage-wrapped ghosts, screamed into orbit like javelins, each one packed with enough neural heat to burn through origin constructs, each one born from pain and designed to die violently. We watched them disappear into the upper atmosphere, silent, focused, and willing. Then we saw what they were flying toward. The Mind Spire had changed. It no longer looked like a construct. It looked organic. Veins of dark matter ran across its surface, spines curved outward like a blooming flower of bone and metal. And in the center, a glowing orb that pulsed with the life signs of every stolen mind still trapped inside. It was a city, a weapon, a monument, and a warning. Then the first Revenant struck it, and nothing happened. We saw the detonation, bright, white, perfect. And then, absorption. The Mind Spire rippled. It had learned. It was using us against us again. Redirect the second wave, I barked. Aim for the orb, center mass only. Revenants swerved. Their processors obeyed. 3 more hit the center. This time the reaction was violent. The orb shrieked. A sound felt more than heard. Chunks of the structure flaked off, screaming sparks into space. We saw it reel. That's the spot, I growled. Cripple the brain. But just as we launched the next barrage, Sinos interrupted. Priority alert, data breach detected. Intrusion vector sourced from Ark 07. Internal systems compromised. What? I snapped. Origin breach? Number human code signature. Encryption matches. Former Admiral Halric. Halric. He'd vanished during the Ark exodus. Presumed dead. But he hadn't died. He'd hidden. I linked directly to Ark 07, fought through firewalls, pushed through static, and what I saw made my gut freeze. He stood on the bridge, wrapped in stolen origin tech, skin fused with black strands, eyes glowing with psionic residue. A monster in a uniform. And he was smiling. Carter, he said, voice calm and smug. "You finally figured out how to wake them up. Took you long enough." "You're a traitor," I growled. "You let them take the Orcs." "I didn't let them do anything. I showed them what we are, that we're useful. They don't want to destroy us. They want to evolve us." I could barely speak. My whole body tensed, my neural presence spasming. "They gutted us," I whispered. "Took our minds, turned us into puppets." "They freed us," he hissed. "From chaos, war, failure. You're the one clinging to extinction." I scanned the systems. He'd locked ARC-07's weapons, aimed them at the Omega Vault, and he had authorization keys from his time as Admiral. Sinos whispered through the feed. "If he fires, the Omega warhead will rupture prematurely." Graith stared at me from across the ARC-03 bridge. "What do we do?" I was already moving. "Override his control, flood his ship with white noise code, cut him off from origin frequencies." "But he's wired into the Spire," Graith said. "His body is not just human anymore." "Then we shut it down the old way." I routed a signal to all 17 ships. "This is Vale. We've been infiltrated. ARC-07 is compromised. We execute fallback Alpha. Burn the traitor." The fleet moved as one. 15 ships pivoted, targeting ARC-07. Energy lances spun up. Magnetic coils thrummed. The air inside our decks thickened with heat and pressure. Halric saw it coming, and he laughed. "I'll be reborn inside the Spire," he whispered. "You can't stop it. I've already opened the path." Then we fired. ARC-07 exploded in a brilliant white blossom. Shrapnel rained into orbit. The shockwave rippled across the atmosphere, and Halric was gone. But the damage was done. The Mind Spire had opened a new structure, a gate. And from it, they came, corrupted clones, hundreds, thousands, all wearing our faces, all holding our memories. Some even wore my face. It was a mockery, a mirror of Earth. The Mind Spire was trying to overwrite us, one identity at a time. "Final assault begins," I said, standing tall. "We push now or we die." The Arcs dove. The last war for Earth had started. The Arc ships entered the lower orbit like a storm of steel and fury. 17 war-forged vessels burned through Earth's corrupted skies, weapons primed, hulls singing from the heat of re-entry. Below us the Mind Spire pulsed violently, throwing up waves of distortion, atmospheric interference, gravitational anomalies, and flashes of raw memory projected into the air like bleeding film reels. It wasn't defending itself with lasers or turrets. It was defending itself with identity. Every Revenant that reached the Spire's outer layer began reporting visual hallucinations, auditory distortion, emotional bleed. One unit, Revenant 6 Alpha, tore off its own limbs before screaming, "I see my mother," and detonating mid-charge. The Spire wasn't just a fortress. It was a psychological black hole. It pulled you into yourself and then used it to eat you alive. But I wasn't afraid, because I had nothing left to lose. Inside ARC-03, I descended into the drop chamber, where the last battalion of enhanced infantry stood ready. They weren't Revenants. These were survivors, real people, wired with enough mental dampeners and psionic shields to resist the Spire's pull for 5 minutes. That's all we needed. I dropped into my rig, an exoframe reinforced with raw origin alloy scavenged from the ruins of ARC-07. I knew it was risky. Alien tech was unpredictable, but Sinos had reprogrammed the core wiring, suppressing any remote interference. This frame would hold, or I'd burn out with it on my back. I sealed the helmet. The HUD flared. Objective: breach Central Mind Nexus. Timer 05000. Omega warhead detonation imminent, T-minus 2:47:33. It was all lining up. We had under 3 hours to get in, destroy the Spire's core, and escape before the Omega device turned this part of the planet into a scar across dimensions. "Drop us now," I ordered. Graith's voice came through comms, tight. "You sure you want to lead the breach yourself?" I didn't answer. He already knew. The drop pod slammed into the upper shell of the Spire like thunder. The surface was warm. Alive. It flexed when we landed, like we'd touched skin. My boots sank an inch into the black, organic metal as I pulled my rifle from its magnetic sling. Around me, soldiers fanned out. No hesitation, no fear, just one shared thought. Take it back, or die trying. The first wave of resistance came in the form of clones, warped reflections of us, crafted from stolen memories. I saw engineers, old friends, even children from the ARC education centers, all moving with insect-like coordination. But it was worse than uncanny. They remembered us. One of them, a twisted mimic of an old flame named Mira, stepped forward and whispered, "You promised me we'd survive." "You broke it." I shot her point blank in the chest. No hesitation. Because the real Mira died during the Exodus. I buried her myself. And I wouldn't let her memory be used like a marionette. "Ignore the illusions," I shouted. "They don't feel, they don't think, they only copy." We moved fast, breaching the first 3 layers in under 20 minutes. But with each level down, the resistance changed. Less clone-like, more monstrous. They began combining our memories, grafting features of multiple humans together. I fought one creature with my face, Graith's eyes, and Sinos' voice. It laughed when I shot it. "We are what you discard," it hissed. "We are your unwanted thoughts." I crushed its throat with my boot. We kept descending. Through tissue corridors. Through data caverns etched into living muscle. The Spire wasn't a building. It was a thinking world. And we were inside its brain. Sinos kept me grounded, rerouting power to my neural dampeners every time the hallucinations surged. My crew wasn't so lucky. 2 soldiers dropped their weapons and tried to claw through the floor, screaming about fire. One kissed his rifle and pulled the trigger before we could stop him. But I didn't stop moving, because I'd seen what waited in the center. I'd felt it ever since the first mind wave hit us back in the bunker. It wasn't the Origins leader. They didn't have a hierarchy. It was their translator. A hybrid designed specifically to interface with the last human hive mind. Me. And when I reached the final chamber, I found it. It looked exactly like me. Same face, same voice, same broken nose and shoulder scar, except it smiled like it enjoyed being broken. "Carter," it said, "you've come home." I raised my rifle. "You're not me." But I was. The moment they pulled your neural imprint from Vault Zeta 9, they used it to understand emotion, fear, rage, futility. They used you to finish the Mind Spire. I could feel it. The pull. The temptation. It wasn't just copying me, it was offering something. "You don't have to die, Carter," it whispered. "We can preserve you. You, the man who refused to surrender. You could become the seed of the next world." I lowered my weapon an inch. Just an inch. That's all it needed. The clone lunged. I fired. The first 3 rounds passed through it like mist. Not a body, not truly, just a mind built from mine. It struck my chest, and suddenly I was elsewhere. Back in the bunker, holding Mira's hand, her eyes begging me to leave with her, telling me we still had time. I screamed, tore away from the memory. Then I was in the wreckage of Arc 03, holding a dying soldier, watching the light fade from her eyes as she whispered, "Why didn't you save us?" Again, I ripped myself free. This wasn't a fight. It was a psychological evisceration. But it made one mistake. It used my regrets against me. I was long past those. I slammed my exo-fist into the clone's chest. It staggered. I grabbed its throat, looked it dead in the eyes. "You think you understand pain?" I hissed. You think you can simulate what it's like to bury every friend you've ever had and still crawl out of the dirt every morning just to bleed again? It writhed. You're not human. You're a goddamn echo. Then I triggered the overload core in my rig. A blast of raw memory, compressed grief, rage, and war trauma exploded into the clone's mental matrix. It screamed, loud, high, horribly familiar, then it shattered. Sinos chimed in. Central Spire matrix destabilized, neural field collapsing, origin data stream interrupted. I sank to my knees. My HUD flickered red. Warning, Spire collapse imminent, 0217.4. Omega detonation countdown, 002943. I opened fleet comms. This is Vale. Central core destroyed. All units evacuate. Head for the stratosphere, now. They moved. The Orcs pulled up in fire and light, dragging survivors, wounded, and bodies. As the walls around me groaned and ruptured, I climbed back to the extraction point. Alone. Bloody. Fading. Because I'd left everything in that chamber, even the parts of me I wasn't proud of. But Earth was waking up. And I wasn't done yet. I could feel the Mind Spire dying. Not just collapsing in the physical sense, not like steel bending or walls crumbling. No, this was something deeper. A psychological death. The moment I shattered the clone version of myself, something in the spire snapped. Every voice in the walls went silent. The illusions stopped. It was like the whole thing had been breathing, and now it had exhaled its last. But that didn't mean we were safe. The Omega warhead was still counting down, T-minus 002316. Sinos kept feeding me real-time data through the HUD. Most of the Arc ships had already broken into upper atmosphere, dragging survivors with them. 5,000 people rescued from across the wreckage, some wounded. Most just staring at the sky like they didn't believe it was still there. That's what victory looked like. Not a cheer, not a flag raised, just stunned silence. But I wasn't on a ship. I was still down in the Spire's core, climbing, crawling, dragging a broken exoframe up through miles of decaying alien structure. My suit was cracked, my air was short, my body was bleeding from somewhere behind my ribs. Didn't matter. I kept moving. T-minus 002109. The Mind Spire above me was falling apart. Not just disintegrating, unraveling. Its walls turned to vapor, its corridors warped into nothing, like the thing that held it together. The stolen minds, the network of identity it fed on, had vanished. And now there was no reason for it to stay real. That was the price they paid for underestimating us. They thought we were just a species, a variable in a grand equation. They never understood what we really were. We are not a pattern. We are a reaction. You can't predict that. You can't program grief. You can't tame rage. And now they'd learned that lesson too late. I reached the outer level and saw the light of the Earth's sky bleeding through a collapsing dome. My extraction point, the final drop pod hanging by cables like a metal cocoon. I stumbled toward it, then stopped, because I wasn't alone. He stood there, the last trace of him. The clone. My face, only half-formed now. The psychic backlash from the overload had torn it apart, but it had enough structure left to speak. "You won," it said, voice glitching. "But what's left of you is ash." I nodded. Better ash than a shadow. It tried to step forward, staggered. "You're afraid of what comes after this. Admit it." I didn't flinch. "Number, I just know that whatever comes next, we earned it." I raised my sidearm. He tried to smirk. I shot him through the skull before he could finish. No hesitation, no regrets. Because if there's one thing I learned, it's this. You kill what mimics you. You don't let it walk away. The clone fell, body unraveling into black static, absorbed by the dying walls of the Spire. I turned and climbed into the pod. Inside, Sinos came through my helmet comms. Extraction path clear, connecting to ARC-03 uplink. Atmospheric breach in 86 seconds. I collapsed into the seat, locked in. Blood pooled under my shoulder plate. T-00143. The pod detached. I felt the burn. The sky stretched above like a wall of flame, and then I was punching through it. The earth curved beneath me, broken but still whole. Pieces of the Mind Spire floated in the clouds like ash from a fire too massive to comprehend. I should have felt proud. But I didn't. I just felt empty. Graith's voice came through as the pod reached rendezvous altitude. "Vale, we've got you. Locking tractor beam." I didn't respond. Sinos pinged me again. "Critical failure detected in biological systems. Internal hemorrhaging. Organ failure imminent." I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, sounds about right." T-001051. The Omega warhead was still live. The vault hadn't been breached. We had enough range now to detonate it safely, but just barely. Sinos would need a final command trigger, a voice print, mine. But the bleed inside my chest. I knew I wouldn't last 10 minutes. Graith's voice crackled in again. "We've got medics. Just hang on, Carter, you made it." I looked out the pod window. The Earth. Blue. Wounded. Alive. But my job wasn't done, because I knew the origin wasn't finished. They'd be back, someday. Maybe not soon. Maybe not in this form. But the Spire was just a node, a tendril. We had to send a message. We had to close the door. T-00:08:34. I reached for the interface, flipped the trigger, lit up the detonator screen. One prompt, Activate Omega Sinos asked, "Do you confirm?" This detonation will permanently collapse the Spire's residual gateway and neural tether points, but the blast radius will destroy this craft. I smiled faintly. There are worse ways to die. Then Graith's voice boomed through again, panicked now. "Carter, no. We've got thousands on board. You've done enough. Let Sinos finish it." I shook my head slowly, speaking into the comm. "Sinos needs my voice, my imprint. It was built to prevent rogue activation. You know that." Silence. "Tell them it wasn't about winning," I said. "Tell them it was about making sure no one else ever had to do this again." I pressed my palm to the scanner. Voice authorization lit up. My throat burned. But I spoke the last words anyway. "Omega, confirmed. Final trigger, Carter Vale." Sinos responded, "Confirmed. Goodbye, Commander." The detonation wasn't fire. It wasn't a blast. It was a silence so complete the stars blinked. The Mind Spire vanished. The hole it left behind was clean. No debris, no noise, just an absence, like Earth itself had refused to carry any part of it. From orbit, the fleet watched. Every survivor stared out a viewport. The world shifted. Something heavy lifted. And then the transmission came through. Omega detonation complete. Spire eliminated. Origin signal gone. They waited for my voice. None came. Weeks passed. The ships landed. The people rebuilt. The skies grew quiet again. They buried me in the ruins of Colorado, in the place where the war had started. No speeches, no monuments, just a marker. Carter Vale. He stayed. Graith carried on. The fleet returned with survivors to rebuild nations, not empires. No one tried to control it all. No flags, no governments, just humanity. The 17 Arcs became shelters, schools, labs, the things we were supposed to carry to other worlds, now grounded, rooted in the one we refused to let go of. And deep in every human heart, a single truth remained. They thought Earth would fall easily. But in the end, only 17 ships escaped. and every one of them came back burning.